Now, proposals to make smacking children illegal have been dropped from new laws making their way through the Northern Ireland Assembly. Some say a ban would have offered young people legal protection against assault, while others say a change could possibly criminalise parents. Striking a child is outlawed in Scotland, Wales and the Republic of Ireland, but it does remain legal in England and in Northern Ireland. Let's speak now to the Children's Commissioner for Northern Ireland, Chris Quinn, and the DUP MLA, Paul Frew. Good morning to you both and thanks very much for being here. Chris, can you set out first of all how the law sits here at the moment? If you can just explain to people, there is currently a legal defence available that you can physically punish children in some circumstances, but can you just elaborate a little bit on that for us, please?
Yeah, that's correct. And as you said, your intro there, Northern Ireland is an outlier. But currently the law has a thing called reasonable chastisement, which currently means that physical punishment of children can still be justified, leaving children with less protection from harm than adults. So there's been decades of research on this, and in fact, each of the children's commissioners, so there's been 3 children's commissioners before myself, and each of the commissioners have recommended this change. So, as we said, there's lots and lots of research. We know that physical punishment can harm children's well-being, can damage relationships, and increase the risk of behavioural and emotional difficulties. We're not saying that this is about criminalising parents. We want to see more support for parents. We're saying that children absolutely do need to understand boundaries, and they need calm discipline, they need positive discipline, and we need to model good behaviour. And look, as a father of 4 boys, I know how rewarding it is to be a parent, but sometimes also how challenging. So I suppose we're disappointed that the debate isn't making the Assembly floor. It hasn't made the list for the discussion this week with regards to the Justice Bill. So we're disappointed there, and I do think this was an opportunity missed in terms of bringing us up to speed with other parts of the UK and indeed international best practice.
Do you know the legal definition of a smack?
Well, this is the thing. It's such a grey area because, it's just, there's no real, it's not a black and white issue. So some people will argue a tap on the wrist or a tap on the bum or whatever, for a young baby. But where's the line? You can't define where that line is. So that's part of the reason. So no form of violence is acceptable between adults. And we believe, and I believe, that children should be treated the same.
With this idea of reasonable chastisement, do you think the law as it stands currently in Northern Ireland could potentially provide a legal defence for abusive parents to hide behind? Chris, is that what you're saying?
No, look, I know what you're saying. I know what the question is. In very extreme circumstances, that's what there is that risk. But what we're saying is that children absolutely need discipline. But in terms of that loophole hiding behind it, I would say those cases are in the minority. But yes, it would leave that risk open.
And just before I turn to Paul Frew, just to get his view, I did want to ask you, Chris, in the Commissioner's office, has a body of work been done, or do you just come across this in your case studies about the mental impact of smacking on children? Have you spoken to young adults now perhaps, about what smacking meant for them as children now in their life as adults?
Yeah, look, there's a large body of evidence and there's decades of research that back this up. And indeed, there was a survey conducted recently where 70% of the public supported legislative change. So yes, we do know that it can have long-term negative impact on people. And indeed, the NSPCC have headed up a UK-wide campaign on this matter. So the evidence is there, and there's decades. This isn't a new piece of research. This research is decades old, and we do know the long-lasting impact can be really detrimental to a child's development and going into their adult lives.
Okay, stay with us, Chris, because I'm just going to turn now to the DUP MLA, Paul Frew. And good morning to you, Paul, and thank you for joining us. Where do you stand on this debate?
Well, I think the defence of reasonable chastisement is bedded in reasonableness, and we are now creating laws in the modern day all around reasonableness when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to coercive control. And so I do think this fits in line with the reasonable person test. And remember, this is not... there was a question you asked there earlier on about the definition of smacking. The reason why there is no definition of smacking is because the way the law is afforded, it's a defence of reasonable chastisement that a parent may or could use if they are in court. So I think removing that reasonableness, removing the defence of reasonable chastisement would be a problem for the police and others. I don't think the state needs to be involving itself in what is basically a debate about what is good parenting. I think they can offer guidance. I think that the bodies out there can assist and help parents. But I do believe that if this defence of reasonable chastisement was removed, then I think it could lead to criminalisation of parents.
Are there circumstances, Paul, where you would view it as acceptable to smack a child?
I think so. I think parents get it tough enough these days. There is so much dangers out there for children of all ages. And I think that parents need to be armed with that last resort so that they can chastise their children and keep them ultimately safe. One thing I should point out too is that this hasn't been dropped from the Justice Bill. This was never ever in the Justice Bill. This was being brought as an amendment.
Yeah, an amendment wasn't selected, yeah.
And it wasn't selected by the Speaker.
Yeah.
It is interesting that where other jurisdictions have moved to remove this defence of reasonable chastisement, they have done it through a full bill, a full piece of legislation, not an amendment. And I think we should have the debate. I think that the Assembly should debate it. And I think it should be in a full bill, whether that be a minister bringing it forward or whether that be a private member bringing it forward.
A couple of points, if I can put to you, if I may, Paul. First of all, as you raised an important point there about the definition of a smack. Do you accept Chris Quinn's argument there that this is a very grey area? Just even when I was reading through this, last night, there are sort of varying definitions, and that can really come down to maybe the person. The one that was most common that I found was like open hand that doesn't leave a mark. But I mean, is that still acceptable behaviour to use towards a child?
Well, that's a debate that's a good parenting debate. So that's why I don't think it should be in law.
But should it even be a debate? Should it even be a debate? Because I suppose in terms of reasonable chastisement might be agreed under the law, but it's not a defence you can use for adults. It's common assault.
So there are many times, anywhere and everywhere, whereby men on a field of play grapple when they're out for a night in the town. They mess about. So there is grey area around this in the law, and there is grey area for a reason. It's because of the reasonableness test, and that's why I think it would be detrimental for us to remove the defence of reasonable chastisement, and that's why it's so important that this stays in the statute book, because it offers that grey area. Now, where there is no grey area is child abuse, sexual violence, violence against women and girls. That's where I think the police resource should be concentrated on.
But do you accept, though, it is an area that can get very, very muddy? And you talked about, smacking being used in circumstances where parents are trying to protect their children from the dangers outside in the world. Surely their home is the one place children should feel safe from any danger. And there are many people who view smacking as a danger because as adults, our job is to regulate our emotions and how we express anger or discipline.
Of course.
But, I mean, what are you teaching children when you as the adult are effective? And I know that the smacking definition varies, but you are lifting your hand.
Yeah, sometimes to protect that child. Imagine a child strikes or leaves your grasp and tries to run across the road, and you grab or manhandle that child. So if you remove the reasonableness chastisement piece, well then you leave the police no other choice but to go and question the parents. And here we talk about adverse incidents on children and how psychologically a smack can damage a child. Well, how much more so police rocking up to your door to question your parents on their conduct towards you?
But what if their conduct was wrong in the first place?
But that's why we have the reasonableness test. and that's why we have a defence in law for reasonable chastisement. And I don't think we need to be messing about with this. I don't think the system's broken here. I think there's protections there. I think what we need is better resource for police to investigate and detect child abuse, which is a completely different thing. And I think that's where our focus and concentration should be on.
Okay, just final point to you there, Chris Quinn.
Yes.
Is child abuse and smacking two totally different things?
They are different. However, the risk is, as we have discussed, the risk is that that line can be crossed very, very easily, and simply put, children don't have the same protection as adults. But interestingly, in countries where we have these laws in place, there is no evidence to suggest that prosecutions have increased, and it does. We also see improved outcomes for children. The last thing I would say, just on a positive note, I was really interested in Paul's input there, and really positive to hear that he does think that this should be discussed in the Assembly. So I think that's a positive for me from this conversation today, because I do think this is such an important issue. It has been going on for a long time, and it does warrant a full and proper discussion in the Assembly. And from my perspective, legislative change. But no, it's good to have the opportunity to talk about it today as well.
Thank you both for joining us. The Children's Commissioner for Northern Ireland, Chris Quinn.